Now to pick up where I left off, I'm going to dry brush on a very localized dry brush of some Strachan green or Strachan green or Strachan green, however it's pronounced. It's a Citadel color, and it does a good job of highlighting this what the heck is it called? Whatever this green is. Go watch the last video. You can find the name there. I've already forgot. But just want to do a little bit of highlighting to help bring out some of the shapes. I probably should have done this before painting all the silver on, but if you're careful, you can go in and do it and not make too many egregious errors. And then I'll just go back, and if I do get any on the silver, any of the other colors, I'll just clean it up. Another thing I like to do is just use some of that color in a fine brush. Just paint all the little details, the little bolts, the rivets, because I just think it makes them look cool to stand out like that. In some areas, if the dry brush didn't get an edge like you wanted, what you can do, what I do, come in here and paint a more traditional edge highlight. You just blur it with your finger like that. You have to work in small sections, but it works pretty well. Now I still need to do these other sections just like I did this green area, but for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to focus on the green area. Next thing I want to do is the panel lining. Now there's several approaches I can take here. If I want it to be a very sharp, distinct, I call it a clean look. Not that necessarily it's going to be not weathered or factory fresh, but just a very sharp, precise look, high contrast. I'll use this Nuln oil because it's basically black, and it's really going to make those panel lines stand out. However, it's a bit, it's a certain style. If you're going for a slightly more realistic style, this may be too much. Now, I could use this Coelia green shade, which is green, and it's going to appear as deeper shadow, and I think going to look a little less stark than this, but at the same time, it's still going to appear as green, as a kind of a green shadow. It's going to work in the panel lines, but like around the bolt details and things like that, it's going to be still a little stark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade because it's brown, and because I'm going to be weathering this, this should work a lot better in the long run because it's going to start the grime process, and it's going to suggest some rust because I'm going to be doing a lot of rusting on these bolts and things like that. Well, I say that now. We'll see if I remember it. But I think this will work well. And I may actually try a mix of these two just to see what happens. But that's the decision-making process I go through when I'm picking a shade like this. Now, I'm because I tend to like to do this with GW models. I just tend to stick to acrylic products. But you could use oils here. You could use enamels. You could use other things that clean up easier and that don't necessarily leave tide marks. But I like sticking, for this build, I like sticking with this style of finish, so I'm going to go with these products. When I'm applying the wash to the bolt detail, what I like to do is load my brush up, and then I'm going to go silent here for a minute because I'm really concentrating, and then I touch it to the top of the bolt, like that. It may take a couple of applications, but by touching it to the top of the bolt, it allows the wash to flow off the brush, and it generally keeps it around the bolt area instead of a tide mark. If you try and paint it around, you're going to get a lot more paint, a lot more of the wash around it. But if you just touch it from the top, it tends to keep it a little tidier and tight around the bolt. And because I'd gone in with that lighter color, it still stands out. Now I may go back and touch up some of them with the Strachan green just to bring them back out again. But that's an easy way to keep your wash from getting out of control. All right, I have the green areas done. You can see that Agrax Earthshade gives it a darker look, but kind of a dirty look. So it starts me down the road towards weathering, which is a good thing. Any areas that I get it out of bounds, if I get too much in an area or something like that, I can go back and clean it up with the darker green color. Generally what I do is I just leave it where it is, and then that informs where I'm going to put some chips or some stains or use later techniques to cover it up. If it's too egregious, that must be my word for the day. I think that's the second time I've used it. It may not be. It's early, but you can go back and clean it up. It's not going to hurt anything, but I just tend to, like, there's a little bit that's along here that got out of hand a little bit, and I'm not going to worry about that because I plan to do some streaking down from that, like some kind of exhaust stain or something. So that'll blend that in and won't be a problem. But I like how the brown turned out. I did use it on the transition between the silver and this because I figured dirt would collect there, and I did it around this side too. But in the line between the black and the green, I'm going to go in with Nuln oil between there because I tend to use Nuln oil around the black parts, and I'll probably go with some Nuln oil around the yellow. I may go with a mix of Nuln oil and Agrax Earthshade so that it doesn't appear too red, because that putting the Agrax Earthshade over yellow can really bring out the red and make it look a little unnatural, so I may use a mix there. We'll see. All right, it's decal time. You know the basic drill. First, I dip it in warm water. Next, I put on some microset, then the decal. I position it, get the microset out from under it. Then I apply a coat of Solvaset, making sure to get a little bit around the edges. And then I leave it be until that Solvaset dries. All right, I've got those decals in place, and they look like decals in place. So next thing I want to do is the chipping. Now I'm going to start on the green areas, and I'm going to go back to this Strakan green, and I'm going to start doing sponge chipping. I'm going to do it along the edges here. Now I've thinned the paint down about 1:1 with water because I want it to be a little bit transparent, a little lower opacity, so that I can avoid building the chipping up too fast. And I'm just dabbing it in like you see there. Trick with sponge chipping, if you've not done it, is you go in and then out, in and then out. If you do it like that, like dry brushing, you're going to get a lot of smears. And if that's the effect you're going for, then hey, go for it. But that's not what I'm going for here. I want to get it chipped around these edges and in the middle of the panels and stuff like that. And then I can go back afterwards and develop some brush chips. Now I use this fine-tipped brush, and I'll just go in and start painting in some streaks, scratches, things like that. And I can use this to stipple on some paint if I couldn't get it in to an area with the sponge. I can do it along edges to define them a little more. Again, if I couldn't get to it precisely with the sponge, I can do it a little more there. I also like to find areas that have already gotten some sponge chipping on them and just build them up a little more. Just a few. You don't want to do too many, in my opinion, because it can get to looking a little cartoonish. And if that's the effect you're going for, then plenty is good. But I just want a little here. My thinking here is this is where the pilot would be reaching to open up the hatch. I imagine that's a handle that he would grab, lift it, pull it up like that. So I'm thinking there's going to be more chipping there than in some of the other areas because of use. But you just kind of go through and put it on with the goal in mind of getting it to the level of chipping that you think it ought to have. Don't worry about what others say about the chipping. You do it, in my opinion, how you want it and how you think it needs to be. Because to put it in Bob Ross terms, this, whatever you're building lives in your world, and however you want it to be in your world is how it ought to be. So I'm going to continue putting on these happy little chips and show you what it looks like when all that's on there. All right, I've got the green chips on. Now I'm going to go to a mix of chocolate brown and basalt gray. And I did this 1-to-1 of the paint. And then when I mixed it up, I gave it an equal amount of water to the total amount of paint, if that makes sense. So I guess you'd say it was 1 part basalt gray, 1 part chocolate brown, and 2 parts paint. I mean, 2 parts water. It's early. Now, I like this because it's a steely kind of look, but it's got a warm color to it. And what I'm going to do is just go in and paint some of this into the middle of some of these larger chipping areas like this. And when I'm doing this, I don't worry if I go outside the bounds of the green. I think that makes sense that it would do that. But at the same time, I don't generally do it too much because I want the green to kind of frame the grayish color. I'm going to keep doing this chipping and get this done and then get to all the other green parts. And then I'll show you a little bit of the yellow and black and just the colors that I use there. For chipping the yellow, I'm using 3 parts yellow, 1 part deck tan, and 1 part white. And then I mixed it all up with a little bit of water. And I'm not going to use a sponge here because it's just such a tight little area that I really doubt that I would not get yellow in a bunch of places that I didn't want. So I'm just going to go in and lightly stipple on just some of the smaller marks and streaks, and then go back in and develop some larger ones. Now, if you've ever heard the old saying about killing 2 birds with 1 stone, that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to use the basalt gray to go in and do the chipping on the black. And on the black area, I'm not going to do 2-color chipping. I'm just going to do the single color because I think going with anything darker than this wouldn't show up, and anything lighter I think would look a little cartoonish. So I'm going to get this in here over on the black area, and then over on this yellow I'm going to use this same basalt gray for the second chipping color and just fill in some of these areas to make it appear as if it goes down deep to the underlying material. Alright, that's how it looks. I can live with this. I'm never super thrilled with my brush chipping. It's something I do a lot, and but I don't know. What I see in my head and how it gets translated onto the plastic are never the same thing, so I'll keep working on it. But for the time being, it'll work. I want to start doing a little fuel staining around this. I'm imagining this to be part of the fueling system, and this over here too. So what I'm using here is basically 2 parts Reikland Flesh Shade and 1 part Nuln Oil. Now this is very similar to Agrax Earth Shade, but it's got a little more red to it, which I think is going to work good with the green. And it also suggests, you know, some kind of diesel or other fuel stain like that. And what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll paint it in like this. Remember, these acrylic shades are not put some on and then blend it. It's an additive process. You put some on and let it dry, and then you put some more on. So that's what I'm going to do. Now this is full on. This is not diluted. And I'm going to put that around there like that. Then I'm going to let it dry. Then I'm going to thin it with a little bit of water, and I'm going to spread the stain out so that it will lower the opacity of the spreading stain. But I want it to appear fairly gummy, like it's been fueled up more than a few times, and somebody spilled some fuel. I'll probably, when I use the thinned version, I'll probably streak some down the sides, being careful to make sure to follow the contours that it would go along if it did flow down off of this. Now I've got a little more that's thinned down heavily with water. I'm just going to stipple that around, and I'll let that dry, and then I'll go back and add some more over the areas that I've done it and in different areas. It just kind of helps build a developing stain around that. But I think I'm going to call this a video for this part of the build. I'm getting right up on, I try to keep these to about 15 minutes, under 20 minutes certainly, for the exclusive builds. And I'm getting up on that time, so I think I'm just going to call this a video. And in part 4, I think that's the right number, I will continue working on this Helverin and getting more into the earth effects and more stains and things like that.